So we're going to do it in the order of the speakers. So that starts with you, Karen, and I think I've already sort of touched on this particular one, because what I'd like to ask you is, from your New York experiences, can you describe 2 or 3 recommendations to create successful multidisciplinary collaboration to achieve the more healthy and active environments that we've got? And you mentioned, the annual conferences as one of the examples. Perhaps you'd like to elaborate a little bit more on what could be done.
Thank you, Chris. I think the conferences are, a forum for dialogue, and so ensuring that we have regular forums for dialogue across the sectors is a really important one. I think ideas that are generated then need to be created into initiatives that are co-led by the relevant sectors working together. And finally, I think, as this slide illustrates, that's still up, the identification, I think, of the multiple benefits that common interventions can create is really important. So identifying health benefits, but also environmental and economic benefits that can occur both for society and for individual people. Thanks.
Okay. So to Norma then. In New South Wales, who do you think should be taking the lead on connecting health, land use and transportation planning? And, what sort of government partnerships are really required for this kind of success?
I think it's very hard to say who should take the lead, because it is such a collaborative thing. In terms of the area of land use planning, of course, planning and infrastructure, here we are. But in terms of actually delivering good, healthy outcomes, it will take contributions from transport, health, even Treasury to be involved in, how we might frame up some of these policies and cost them and make sure that they are going to deliver good benefits for the whole of New South Wales. So it's hard to say who might take the lead on these things, but certainly the Premier has made it clear that it's high on his agenda. So the Department of Premier and Cabinet will also have an important role to play, I think, in pulling together the activities of all the agencies. And the State Plan New South Wales 2021 already sets a really good precedent for that. And the second part of your two-hander was?
Is what government partnerships are really required to do this, to be successful?
Well, I think you need some sort of decent structure in terms of like a sort of integrated project control group almost around delivery of certain aspects of this work. So it needs to have high-level buy-in and high-level collaboration across agencies, but not to forget the relationship we have with local government too. So there needs to be probably a series of arrangements for governance for this sort of activity to be delivered. There's no glib answer to this, I don't think. And it has to be a mechanism that will stand the test of time and people will not grow tired of and wears people out. It's got to be something that we can continue to inject with excitement and interest, or else people's interest falls away.
Without putting you on the spot,
Oh,
I mean,
here we
is I mean, if there's not an identified leader, is there risk that no one takes the lead? And because of the multiple levels of government involved, there are so many potential players that it's very hard to get a coalition together. And so it's not to blame infrastructure or planning or transport or anyone, but it's a realpolitik that we face.
Yeah, well, that's, I think, what's such a great thing about New South Wales 2021 and the Department of Premier and Premier himself putting the shoulder behind this, because there is the key agency of government, if you like, and the plan that guides New South Wales government agencies for the next 10 years, talking about this being an important issue and having a series of actions and goals that will be achieved, that drives us all and effectively coordinates us all on the same path.
Okay, thank you. All right, to you, Matthew. Can you please describe how health planning and or transport stakeholders can more or most effectively work with developers to ensure the incorporation of healthy planning principles into the master plan estates? I mean, I'm sure you've got views about how these people could be easier to work with.
Well, easier. I think that comes down to, mainly that's down to the individual in terms of easier. But what I would say is keep engaging, keep going. Everyone here's spoken about collaboration, and that's why we're all here. And there's got to be others out there who like to collaborate and innovate. I picked a couple of examples out. Engage in those pilots, like the smart work centres, like the integrated primary health care. You know, they'll start small and grow, and they'll be great examples for people to talk about. But also, I touched on the consumer in my presentation and probably didn't hammer it quite enough. A lot of the things, if not, in fact, all of the things I spoke about are things that turn our consumer on. And if you were to engage the development industry from that platform rather than just a straight altruistic basis, which we're all human, so that's good too. But if you point out the benefit that the consumer is going to get turned on by this as well, then it'll flow. And there's got to be more than what I've just spoken about. And I haven't heard anything here that a consumer wouldn't be turned on about from a developer's perspective.
So consumer is really local then. So it's a labour intensive aspect of the work you have to do. But you said it was all came down to
when I point to the consumer, I'm the people that buy the product that the developer creates. So if I'm selling a block of land, I can sell a block of land that's got no footpaths, that has a very narrow street with nowhere to walk, that isn't connected to anything, and I can sell it. But I can sell more, and we've shown it time and time again. And Oran Park is a great example, where if you build it to those exacting standards up front, people will get turned on by it. And we've exceeded our own sales targets. In 2010, we launched in March with expectations that we might just get out of our $50 million investment hole and sell 120 blocks of dirt in the first year. And we ended up clearing the decks by November that year and having to release land off the plan, which had never been done by me before, and I can't think of many examples. And we haven't stopped having to release land off the plan since then. And it's painful, but why have we done that? So we're now at the point where we've got 350 occupied homes, where we thought we might have had around 200. We'll double that by the end of the year, and we're looking at, instead of sales rates of 240 per year, we're more likely to get 350 to 400 per year is where we're headed. So what does that mean? You put those things up front and show people, they'll like it and want to come.
And
so it's an additional upfront investment, but the benefits are there to people who engage in a vision.
And you see other land developments for sale with pictures of children on bicycles and people walking through parks as a clear sales pitch, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you. So to Corinne, you know, as an academic, I mean, you've got an outside, well, not completely outside, but you know, a different view on how the agencies might work together. So could you elaborate on what you see as some of the opportunities for the transport and planning and health agencies to systematically integrate active transport and health into all the stages of planning?
I think the picture is wider than the agencies, and I think Norma has identified the way in which the agencies are working together. I think as an academic, I actually see the collaboration that needs to be made is wider than just agencies, and it's wider than agencies and business. It should encompass all stakeholders, the research element, the advocacy element, businesses, as well as agencies. And I think the research community has got quite a lot to do in terms of understanding better what is being done in different parts of the research community. And it's sufficiently important that the business school at the University of Sydney is going to create a research network for business and health, which will start coordinating from our side some of the experiences that are going on. But I think one of the two things about New South Wales which I think could do with being explained is, first of all, that I have a perception that when you talk about the future with people here, it's all about what new infrastructure we need in order to be able to make the next step. Karen's shown us what you can do with a pot of paint. And I think that there's a lot more that could be done to make use of what we already have, as well as develop nice infrastructure that costs money. The second part of the issue, not just in New South Wales but worldwide, is a lack of understanding from the professional side, I think, of the different professionals that are involved in our placemaking and in our transport systems. So if you just take a road, traffic engineers are interested in how many cars you can get through, but urban designers are interested in placemaking. And all these professionals are interested in the same space, but come from a different background with different languages. And as part of that professional community, I don't think that I make enough effort to understand where other people are coming from in order, from my perspective, to put them right about what they're doing. Perhaps I should leave it there.
No, that's a good answer. Thank you. Okay, to you, Matt Faber. This is a question that I'm interested in too, and how can I work better with transport? But from your point of view, as an advocate for active transport within Transport Ministry, how can health and planning work with transport to maximise the return of the significant public health investments that you talked about today? And, what would you like to see those agencies do?
I find myself going around issues or questions of governance and the way that agencies and public servants relate to each other and processes and where the leadership should come from. And in the end, there is no right answer to that. It's a matter of, as always, people having access to information about what works and what doesn't, because it's not rocket science. I mean, I was just thinking when Norma was addressing the issue of, where should the leadership come from? Peter's map showed that people living in the inner west, drive maybe 5,000 kilometres a year as a household, 1/8 as much as people in, say, Kellyville. And they definitely walk a lot more. They certainly ride bikes a lot more and walk a lot more, so they are already engaging in active transport with good health outcomes. When Marrickville was laid out, when the Main Western Rail Line was built, when all the land use decisions were being made in Marrickville, no one was leading active and healthy planning. It was a function of, in reality, what were the available options at the time. So happens that the outcomes have been, a grid street system, good public transport, relatively dense development providing walking access opportunities. The examples are there in Sydney for us to be able, and Matthew's doing this. He's taking an area which is a big paddock, effectively with a raceway, and saying, well, we know there are ways of doing this that don't work, and actually we find don't appeal to the consumer in terms of, reliance on cul-de-sacs and you have to drive to get a carton of milk, etc. Guess what? People don't like that. It's not a surprise. And there are then models which are more, denser and more traditional in their grid layout, which you can't lift and transfer entirely to Oran Park, but you can take the principles and apply them. And they work and people respond to them. And I think as public servants, whether we're in transport, health or in planning, we know that stuff. It stares in the face as we move around the city every day. We know what works, we know what doesn't. At the beginning and the end of the day, I'm working in transport where the priority is, say, to deliver the North West Rail Link or to do planning that will ultimately deliver a major road project like WestConnex. It's about identifying through having access to knowledge and information and insight, having information that then means we have the reason and the tools to go and talk to our colleagues in other portfolios about ways to make things work. And that's where PCAL comes in, to my mind, as a stirrer with professional status and with the important P word in its title, the Premier, wants this to happen. That doesn't mean that it can fundamentally change the silo directions of what is a transport portfolio, but it does mean that we have an opportunity, a kind of playground or a place where we can, in a virtual sense as a community, but also through formal structures that Peter's set up, engage with our colleagues on healthy outcomes. I don't know that there's a better system than what we've got at the moment.
Well, and so I was trying to work out if that's a positive answer, that things have got better. And that
Definitely. It was. I'm sorry if it didn't come across as that. I think I'm close to the issue, and as a consequence, I've overthinking it in my answer. But definitely, things are a lot better. The access to information and the understanding of what results from different decisions for urban design, transport investment, etc., means that the default situation now, say for a major road or rail project, is right. We assume, as Corinne said, we are going to provide walking and cycling access, absolutely, unless other factors make that impossible, rather than the opposite, where in the past that needed to be added on and justified separately.
No,
I do think, though,
So
that
things
it
are a
is,
lot better.
Matt, not to disagree with you, but I do think we can't underestimate the importance of the public message that New South Wales 2021 contains.
Definitely.
For the community of New South Wales, that these things are important
Yeah.
for us all, and the government is, supporting them. So I think
Sure.
it's that is a really important element of trying to
And
get everybody to work.
at the when push comes to
collaboratively.
shove, my Director General and Norma's Director General have performance agreements that are with the Premier, which have their performance measured against targets specific to the portfolio. But if they're achieving, if achieving a planning target to do with land release or whatever is at odds with my DG achieving a target relating to growth in the use of walking and cycling, then, those guys are going to want to sort it out and to make sure that the people underneath them are going to sort it out, so that these things are not in conflict and we can find solutions that work across the planning, transport and health areas.
Will anything happen if we don't meet the targets?
I don't think people will lose their jobs, but I do think that people in this room and outside this room, everyone will know. And to that extent, if government has to say, well, we didn't achieve it, then there'll be a need to say, and this is why we didn't. And third part, this is what we're going to do about it now in reframing our targets. The walking and cycling ones are 3 years ahead in terms of their measure. So, yes, they're stretch targets.
Corinne, would you like to add something there?
Yes, I'd just like to add that I think targets are all right from a government point of view, and I'm really interested and impressed that the agencies are so motivated by meeting their targets. But actually, I'm much more interested in the way that we communicate to people who form the general public of New South Wales as to the benefits that they receive through doing things which are healthier for them. Because the knock-on effect, if you like, and the way you justify building better environments that promote active living is through the health benefits that are captured by government. And I think the one issue that hasn't been raised today, and I'm really pleased that the Premier's interest may make this less of an issue, is that when you're planning new infrastructure today, the health benefits will actually accrue to the health minister probably 30 years on. And there is this intertemporal issue about how you generate health benefits which are going to be due in the future, whereas most ministers are concerned with their here and now budgets and how they're going to be spent. And that, I think, is a big barrier for us in terms of the valuation guidelines.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Corinne. That's a useful addition. And finally to you, Peter. You're at the cutting. You're at the cutting edge. You're there. You're the in between everyone. And so, from your point of view, you know what the challenges are from interagency collaboration to get more supportive urban environments and strategies. So, what do you need to be able to do your work more effectively?
I think Corinne has highlighted a nice point there, that we need a mixture of deliverables that meet political needs as well as longer term goals. So in terms of interagency work, I think we need to The council was established in 2005, and so over that time we've had a number of different agencies represented. There's some agencies have fallen off over that period because we really didn't keep them engaged with meeting mutually agreeable goals, I think. So there does need to be clearly a project that meets the needs and the short-term and long-term needs of multiple agencies. So look for the project that you can pursue, I think is something that ticks several boxes. And that and what we certainly saw over time was agencies saw that it was working and would then would put their money where the outcome was, and so that we'd get more money and contributions annually from member agencies because there was then a sense that we could achieve work, and so work would be identified that had an interagency focus, and that there could be pooling of resources to get a better result. So following that line of work, we would also then, if an opportunity arose, pursue it for as long as we could as well. So what we've certainly found from a resources perspective is that the case studies have been very useful and very popular on the site in terms of just trying to show what can happen and then try to disseminate that information and then let people access that information. And also, Chris, I've become less and less precious about physical activity and language. It is. And physical activity for health is a livable town centre for planning, or active transport for transport, or a green travel plan for environment. And so being flexible to look at how a project can have results across a number of different agencies has been useful, and also looking at the lower hanging fruit and not getting too every agency, every organisation seems to have some issues that are particularly sensitive, so stay away from those, address them over the longer term, but there's so many other things to be done, so do the things that can be done.
Good. Thank you, Peter. Now, there was some concluding question for the panellists, a bit of a crystal ball kind of idea, but I think I'd rather throw it to the audience to see if any one of you has a question for the panel, because this is an opportunity to ask something that you might like to. And a hand goes up straight away. Is that you, Fiona?
I'm not sure if I'm loud enough.
You might have to scream out.
I think there are lots of really good points raised, the costs and benefits accruing to different departments, the Director General's performance-based agreements being related to their own targets. What would happen if we, with the targets that were, we've got health targets on obesity, we've got transport targets, what if we linked the Director General's performance pay to achieving the collaborative targets as well, so that the Transport Director General had to help achieve the obesity targets?
That's out of the box. That's that may be the kind of thing we need. Is there a comment from the panel?
An innovative thought, Fiona, that I think pose a challenge in terms of measuring, and I think that's a good point. What gets measured gets done. So if we could think of an effective way to measure that, that would be something that we could take forward.
So if the Director General of Health got 80% on his obesity target, or her obesity target, then the component of the Transport Director General's obesity target they'd only get 80% of that money as well, that part of the bonus.
Can I just say that I think that talking about 80%, Fiona, is not really productive. You say all the DGs from all the departments only get a pay rise if they all meet all their targets.
Where it's a collaborative target that requires both.
Then I can't think that you would find a single target in the state plan in which one agency couldn't help another agency if that's what they wanted to get. So I think they're all collaborative to a different degree, and I think aligning responsibility is not helpful. They should all have collective responsibility for all of them.
That would certainly make them work together.
Okay, so no other responses forthcoming?
That's obviously a challenging position. Yeah. And obviously each of the agencies is developing a plan to implement those targets that operates across agencies, and I won't let,
Okay, all right. So we'll move on. Catriona, would you like to?
Katrina Bonpilieri from University of Technology of Sydney. I think that there's been a remarkable progress in the interagency, interdepartmental work between environment, planning, transport and health. The agency that's missing in my mind is education. Do you have an education department person on PICAL? Are education locked out of this game? Are they not willing to play? What's the story of education?
Membership of the councils from invitation from the Premier. We've previously had education as a representative, but they're not currently represented. It would be obviously we take our direction from the Premier and what the Premier's priorities are. So we've got quite specific deliverables. Those deliverables have a focus around food, and so that's what we're doing at the moment. That key piece of work is that initial piece of work to develop some key messages. There'll be a steering group that direct that work, and usually the way PICAL operates is that we take the opportunity for a piece of work to invite some key stakeholders, and obviously education would be one, and they can obviously be invited to participate.
Okay, all right. So we've got lots of hands coming up, so we'll have time for a few of them, but perhaps not all of them. So I can see one here, I can see one there, and I can see one here. So and one at the back. So there's 4 questions to go, and that's it.
Thanks, Rebecca. Paul Clarinard here from Northern Sydney Health. This is for Matthew or Matt, actually, and it just relates to our pattern of urban sprawl and car dependency, and the way focusing on livable town centres is obviously a very promising and positive strategic planning direction that we're going in. But in terms of justifying pure greenfield development, apart from the upfront costs and the here and now, like, I suppose, minimal or less political opposition to greenfield development, is there any justification, strategic justification for greenfield development in Sydney?
Well, maybe I can I can rescue him there. When we look at the growth of Sydney, we're planning. Our strategic plans tend to go either for 20 or 25 years ahead, and so at the moment we're planning for about a 20-year horizon and expecting about 1.3 million extra people. So we have to keep the capacity of the existing urban area to accommodate that growth under constant review. Greenfield is more expensive, we've found in recent research, to deliver, but the government's very concerned to make sure that there's a wide variety of choice in housing, and housing delivery has been at very low levels in New South Wales over recent years. So the government's mind is very focused on how to improve housing delivery as almost, the preeminent outcome of good strategic planning at the moment. So in terms of, if you like, existing urban area infill versus greenfield, they're overwhelmingly the delivery of housing has been in the existing urban area recently, with a much smaller proportion on the fringe. There is always going to be a bit of a market for that sort of development, but it is overwhelmingly in favour of renewal and more intense development in the existing urban area for a whole host of reasons, not least of which is savings in infrastructure and really better living environments for people, and again for a whole host of reasons, because they're close to the things they need rather than more remote. So there will always be a need, there will always be a desire, but the tendency is to focus more strongly on the urban area in our strategic planning now.
Okay, thank you, Norma. There was one along the way, and there's one down here. So in the middle there, along your road, Paul, and then we'll come to the woman in the purple. I don't know your name.
Christina Hicks. This is a bit of a question from left field. One of the ways that we seem to do business in New South Wales has been on the nightly news recently, and I was just wondering, it's very impressive listening to agencies and also listening to the academic, that so much knowledge is there, so much expertise, and yet we do know that many things that have been done in New South Wales have been done, as we've seen, in a very negative way on the local news in the last few days. I was just wondering if anyone of the panel has any strategies perhaps to think how they may perhaps remain pure at heart or continue as best they can in terms of the expertise and the knowledge that clearly agencies do have for the benefit of us, the people?
That's a very broad question. Maybe would anyone like to address that one?
Well, I would just say, as bureaucrats, of course, we always assemble the best evidence we can when we're arguing a point to ministers and their staffers. So there will always be that from a bureaucrat's point of view, the need to provide the best evidence available in as objective a way as possible. Thereafter, it's it's the government story, of course. So.
And Karen, would you like to?
I was going to say, it really struck me as I was listening to the panelists, how much knowledge there is in the room amongst the, professionals in the different sectors, our academics. And to Corinne's point earlier and then to Matthew's point, one of my questions as I'm sitting here listening has been, how has all of this knowledge and information been packaged and communicated to members of the public? Right, so that they too are aware of the kind of interagency work needed and also occurring to really improve the many outcomes that for their health, their family's health, and for society. And then at the same time, all of the information that Matthew was talking about in terms of the economic arguments for creating healthier developments for the developer and for private industry. And so I guess my question was, all of the knowledge that's here, all of the information that we've heard today, how is that being communicated to the public and then to sectors outside of government?
Good comment, thank you. All right, we have two final questions, one here and then one at the end. Yep.
Should I go? Okay. Hi, this is a question for Matt Faber. Hi, Matt. My name's Kay from Western Sydney LHD.
That's local health district for
North West Rail is actually finally getting built. It's great. But my question is about the walking and cycling access to the stations and the main roads, and what's going to be done about improving access in the form of some sort of overhead bridge to those stations with the main roads. And I'm thinking Rouse Hill and I'm thinking Cherrybrook.
Okay, well, the short answer is I don't know, and I'm happy to give you my contact details and try and find out about specific situations. I will say, though, that in the case of Rouse Hill and what was the other one? Cherrybrook?
Cherrybrook has got
Okay.
a Castle Hill Road.
Cherrybrook I am, outside the context of the presentation, I made less familiar with than Rouse Hill. Rouse Hill I have been involved with because of the T-Way project a few years ago. What I will say about access across main roads for pedestrians, particularly getting to stations, but it could be any destinations, is it's obviously a very challenging issue. And what I will say is the more we can do to remove the need for a bridge through good planning at an early stage, the better. And Rouse Hill is a good example of where, in the world of low density development, relatively low density development, and the shopping facilities that go with it, Rouse Hill's actually a bit of a poster child for a good model of a shopping centre, which, albeit with a lot of parking, encourages within the centre a lot of pedestrian access. It may be that a future scenario for Rouse Hill, particularly when the rail station comes and opens and the rail arrives, is that you see that shopping centre going upwards, and perhaps development on the other side of the road, the old lawn cemetery site perhaps, that is also at a number of stories where you could then provide a natural bridging over the road. We all know we want to avoid tunnels for pedestrians. In an ideal world, you would be able to traffic calm roads where you could provide the pedestrian crossing at grade. The reality is, with Windsor Road, that's not going to be the case. So integrating the planning for the road with the planning for the adjacent land uses is the best way coming up with the best solutions to those kind of needs, in my experience.
Okay, thanks, Matt. We'll have to move on. And so the final question up here.
Thanks, Chris. Alex Unwin from Bicycle New South Wales. This isn't really a question, it's really a statement. And I think that Fiona's comments were really, really interesting and kind of thought-provoking, and I guess demonstrates that Fiona's been working in this public policy space for some time and understands some of the challenges about managing large agencies and managing government. Now, far be it for me to advise the Premier and Cabinet about how they manage the government in New South Wales, at least not publicly. What I would say, though, and it's a point that Matt made in his presentation when he was talking about Oran Park, and it was a little bit of a side comment about, well, we're all human, and everyone's human. And every Director General and every Cabinet Minister and the Premier, and in fact every politician and bureaucrat in the land, as far as I know, is human. So we're all human. What we've been talking about this morning is actually humans' health, people feeling good about themselves, people having better lifestyles. So I think everyone who's involved in this space should always return to the reason that we're doing this isn't because it's some political party or some bureaucrat's agenda. That's part of it, but also recognising this is actually a good thing that we do. So I actually commend Peter and you guys for bringing this group together, because I think it was really, really helpful. And I think the learning we can get from what's happened in other parts of the world and the stuff that Karen's brought to the table is fantastic. So thank you.
Okay, thanks for that comment. So now, prior to...
Yeah, just one comment. In terms of trying to enact things immediately, Chris, sorry to interrupt the flow there. Samara Kitchener from the Food Authority thought she could do something, because she's got some kilojoule labelling work to do. She could enact some of the work of Karen's right now.
Sorry, we've just whipped up a little social media campaign in the last hour, which I'm going to share with you, because you all are going to become part of this social media.
This is not on the...
No, yeah, yeah.
Who signed this off?
Yes, yeah.
No, unfortunately. Okay, so anyway, the campaign that we're running is about helping people understand kilojoules and the menu labelling that's now on fast food restaurants. Coming up.
Never does.
Anyone know how to change the input?
Usually with mice.
Okay, it's not quite working. But anyway, what we've done is we've, on our Facebook page, we've created on the 8700 Facebook page a little thing where people can vote for the Karen's poster, New York City's poster on burn calories, not electricity. And we're trying to get people to talk in kilojoules in Australia, because we're on the metric system. And one of our big challenges with helping people understand the kilojoule labels in fast foods, and actually now in supermarkets, is getting them to understand kilojoules. So on our Facebook page, we're asking people to vote for us to turn the burn calories not electricity poster into burn kilojoules not electricity. And as a true collaboration effort, what the New South Wales Food Authority and Ministry of Health are looking to do is we can create these posters on burn kilojoules not electricity that we can then use across all of our spheres of influence and, you know, within our sort of areas. So what I would like you to do, those of you with organisational Facebook pages, if you can get on and find our 8700 Facebook page, and I'll forward the details to Peter. We've also got a Twitter campaign as well. And if you can share that with your audiences, and we can generate a bit of buzz around this sort of poster, and then ultimately we can see the poster with obviously Karen's approval across the streetscapes and railwayscapes and, you know, staircases of New South Wales. So anyway, I'll ask Peter to forward the 8700 Facebook address to you.
Okay, it's a shame we couldn't see the image, but that's okay. These things work. So now, prior to concluding the session, I'd like to invite Michelle Daly, who's the Active Living Senior Manager for the National Heart Foundation, to come up and to extend our thanks to the panel members.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Thanks everyone for coming today. It's been a privilege to host Karen's visit to Australia in partnership with PCAL. And I just wanted to thank the panel very much for their insights today as well. But just a quick word following on from the panel's comments before. Lots of talk about what government can do. we're an NGO, and obviously we've got a role in all of this as well. So I really enjoyed hearing you talk, Matt, about the consumers. And you'll find in your packs a resource we recently developed that looks at consumer preferences for healthy development, aimed at the development industry. So nice tie-in, I thought. And it actually does sum up some survey data that we have that confirms that people do want to live next to decent transport and within walkable distance to shops and services. So I think it's great to have that reinforced, and just to reinforce our role as a public health agency, a non-government agency, we're very active in advocacy around healthy urban planning. So without going any further, thank you for your contributions, panel. We appreciate the time you've put into preparing for today. Luckily, I know where they hired the good stuff at Parliament House. Normally I'd deliver, but we're very big on sitting less at the Heart Foundation, so I think in honour of your health, I really should get you to stand up and come over so you break up your sitting time, and everyone else will do in a minute when they go to lunch. But thank you to the panellists. Now, Pete, as a co-organiser, your reward comes in your next paycheck. So I'll bring the other 5 panellists up. And I'd also like to extend a thanks to Chris for chairing today as well. So I'd like to extend a token to him. And I just want to make quick mention, before we clap everyone, of Rebecca Costello from PCAL, who has put in a monumental amount of work behind the scenes on administering a lot of the aspects of today. So a big round of thank you to everybody for their input.